Good evening to all of you. It's good to address an audience in flesh and blood rather than look at a blank screen. My good friend Shri Salman Khurshid, my good friend Shri Digvijay Singh, Ms. Ragini, friends. Like everyone else, I was born into a family that practiced a religion. It happened to be the Hindu religion. We worshipped a variety of gods, from village deities to Lord Ganesh, Lord Shiva, Lord Subramanya, Lord Krishna. My mother performed the usual rituals, observed the usual festivals. And all that was described as the way of life of Hindus. That way of life did not stop my mother to admit me to a Catholic convent or to a Christian missionary school or to a Catholic college, or to accept for 5 years in high school A.K. Musa as the class leader, nor to accept as a school pupil leader Harun Mohammed as a school leader. Nor did it interfere with our way of life if we visited the St. Lazarus Church, which was the closest place of worship to my home, nor the famous St. Thomas Cathedral at its annual festival, which attracted thousands of people, mostly non-Christians. That, we were told, is a way of life. It didn't stop me from keeping the picture of Mother Mary under the pillow, nor did it prevent me from going to the chapel in Loyola College. Those things did not interfere with our way of life. We are now told that that is not the way of life. Hindutva is the way of life. And no less than a former Chief Justice of India said that seeking votes in the name of Hindutva did not amount to seeking votes in the name of religion, because Hindutva is not a religion, it's a way of life. So looking back, I have practiced Hindutva for the last several years without knowing what I was doing. It's very difficult to reconcile what I learned as the Hindu way of life and what is being propagated today as the Hindu or the Hindutva way of life. Be that as it may, I certainly do not know as much about religion as my good friend Digvijay. Obviously, words have acquired a new meaning. Obviously, practices have acquired a new meaning. Whatever Gandhiji thought was Ram Rajya is no longer the Ram Rajya as understood by many, many of our fellow citizens. Likewise, what Panditji told us about secularism is certainly not the way secularism is understood by many millions of our fellow citizens. For example, secularism has moved away from acceptance to tolerance and from tolerance to an uneasy coexistence. Secularism has moved away from community living to living apart, to living in ghettos. Secularism has moved away from having friends among all communities and all religions to a time when, and I've tried this on young students, young listeners, how many of you among the Hindus has a Muslim friend? And those who said they had a Muslim friend couldn't count more than one. So I think these words have acquired a very different meaning. And unless we recognize what has happened to our country in the last 15 or 20 years, we would not be true to what we believe India should be. Today we live in a world where lynching is not condemned by anyone in authority. Certainly not the Prime Minister, certainly not the Home Minister. An advertisement by a internationally well-known watchmaker and jeweler has to be pulled out because it portrays a Muslim daughter-in-law living happily in a Hindu joint family. An advertisement by another well-known brand, Fab India, has to be scrapped because someone interpreted 3 Urdu words as denigrating Diwali. And none of us rise in protest when riots in Muzaffarnagar and northeast Delhi limp along to a predictable conclusion when witness after witness turns hostile and the judges have to castigate the police for shoddy investigation. Certainly no one in high authority seems to be stirred by these contemporary, everyday occurrences. This book is about what happened in Ayodhya, what happened to the Babri Masjid. That story started in 1992 and came to a completely unexpected end on the 9th of November 2019, exactly 2 years ago. The jurisprudential basis of that judgment is extremely narrow. It's a very thin ledge. But due to the passage of time, what the author points out is both sides have accepted it. Because both sides have accepted it, it has become a right judgment. Not the other way around. It's not a right judgment which both sides have accepted. Because both sides have accepted it, it has become a right judgment. And my good friend Salman Khurshid does not want to rock the boat, does not want to stir the hornet's nest. And I understand his reluctance to do so. Digvijay spoke about truth and reconciliation. I thought he emphasized reconciliation more than truth. Nelson Mandela promised truth and reconciliation, but first the truth must be told, and then there can be reconciliation. The truth was that what happened on the 6th of December 1992 was a terrible wrong. It was an incident that debased our Constitution, that defied the Supreme Court, and created what appeared to be at that time an unbridgeable chasm between two communities. It was wrong, terribly wrong. I will say it 100 times, it will always be a terrible wrong. Having said that, it's perfectly right to say a wrong has been committed, but please reconcile. But I think it is patronizing to tell the people of this country, over 200 million Muslims, please reconcile, because that's what it is. 46 concerned retired officers belonging to the various services of India issued a long statement after the judgment of the Supreme Court saying, quote, "We also pledge that we will not allow our great Constitution to be emptied of its soul," unquote. The judgment of the Supreme Court, whether it emptied the soul of the Constitution, is for each one of you to decide. But leave the judgment aside. Every day there are occurrences that empty a bit of the soul of our Constitution. And yet, no one in high authority is willing to stand up and speak for this grave debasement, denigration of our Constitution. This book, of course, is a splendid record of what happened in the last 28 or 29 years. One doesn't have to go to any other source, any other record. Everything that you want to know about what happened before and after 1992 up to this date is there in this book. It's in that sense an extremely useful reference book for future historians. After the Supreme Court judgment, things took a predictable course. Within a year or so, everyone who was accused, something like 300 people who were accused, were acquitted. So like no one killed Jessica, nobody demolished the Babri Masjid. That will forever, that conclusion will forever haunt us, that in this country of Gandhi and Nehru and Sardar Patel and Abul Kalam Azad, 75 years after independence, we are not ashamed to say that nobody demolished the Babri Masjid. In fact, the most telling paragraph in this book is in the introduction, which remains anonymous as the author is. Who wrote the introduction, I'm not able to say. It does not have the word Salman Khurshid under that, but it's possible that he may have written the introduction. But whoever wrote the introduction says, and I quote, "We continue to claim adherence to high principles of secularism, social inclusion." I'm sorry, let me say that again. "We continue to claim adherence to high principles of secularism, social inclusion, and the rule of law." We continue to claim adherence to high principles of secularism, social inclusion, and the rule of law, but submit to reality and pragmatism to preserve the delicate bonds of national unity. So on the one hand, we proclaim very grandly that we are committed to secularism, but ultimately we submit to pragmatism and say, this is the way India will be, this is the way India will go, and we have to accept pragmatically in order to preserve, quote unquote, national unity. Now, whoever wrote that introduction hit the nail on the head. It describes what most Indians are today. We may be passionately secular, but I think many of us are succumbing to pragmatism and accepting all that is being done to destroy secularism in this country. Every day, if you open the newspaper, you will find one blow against secularism. How long will the Indian Republic remain secular if there is a blow after blow after blow every day? Is a question which I hope my good friend Salman will answer in his next book. Thank you.
नमस्कार, मैं हूं मानक गुप्ता। अगर आपको हमारा ये वीडियो पसंद आया हो तो इसे लाइक और शेयर जरूर करें, और हां, हमें सब्सक्राइब और फॉलो करना ना भूलें ताकि आप देश और दुनिया की कोई खबर मिस ना करें। तो जुड़े रहिए हमारे साथ और देखते रहिए न्यूज़ 24।